It is my great pleasure, Helena, that you're here, that you have time for joining us. And we're looking forward to your presentation on the topic of visual contract design patterns and see your insights from research, but also from practice. So Helena is not only a professor at the university, but also an active lawyer. And so I'm particularly proud of having her here because she is one of the great speakers actually of ReMeP, bringing together the research part and the practice part as we want to do it here in ReMeP. So Helena, very warm welcome and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Now, are you seeing my slide okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, design patterns, my topic today. And here's the agenda. First, an introduction of who we are and why we do what we do here. Contract visualization. What is it and how does it look? We have divided it into 4 different sections: visuals in contracts, visuals about contracts, visuals for contracts, and visuals as contracts. I'm going to focus on the first 2. We have done this for quite a while. I started some 25 years ago. I'm going to do a brief history, not too much, but some, to show that this is not really a new thing. Visual contract design patterns, then I plan to do a demo of the World CC contract design pattern library that Stefania Pasera and myself built and designed for the World CC a few years ago, where we have open access, free resources for you if you are interested in applying these patterns. And then we have time for questions. Now, I am very proud and happy to be one of the winners of the European Women of Legal Tech 2020, but I must disappoint you. It's not for tech skills, it's for my legal design, contract design skills. So we are going to be very low tech here today. My teammate or partner in crime, if you wish, Stefania Pasera, the 2 of us have worked on several projects together. And as an introduction myself, I am a practitioner by day. I used to work as an in-house counsel, as a contracts lawyer, and then I am a researcher and author and editor by night. Stefania is also a practitioner and a scholar. So we both work at the University of Vaasa part-time and then do our own work jointly and severally. What we have done, we did our dissertations, both of us, on contracts. So here's the cover of mine, which is really conceptual on next generation contracts. And then Stefania's Beyond the Wall of Contract Text. That is a very scientific proof of the fact that these things work, that visualized contracts work better than text only. I picked one of the early examples of our contract visualizations, and we do text plus. We have text and add an explanation or a visual summary to the text. So here's a clause, termination clause, shown in text and in an image. Early on, we saw that people in the field, project managers, operational managers, they like the visual. That's faster, that's easier, that's the language they are used to, rather than just reading long texts. Some other early examples, again, a timeline from one of our early work. This is part of the book that came out this year. So visual representation patterns in contract design. If you're interested, you can read more about this. And we started to collect patterns quite early. In 2016, Margaret Hagan and myself, we wrote an IRIS paper and also put up a library, a prototype pattern library for design patterns for contracts. Wrote a paper. It's on SSRN. We also wrote some practitioner-oriented paper, less academic, like this one for Juro's blog post, Design Patterns for Contracts, or how you've been doing contracts wrong this whole time and how to fix it. Legal design pattern libraries are, of course, not just about contracts. My topic today is contracts, but we have applied them for various other topics, for privacy design with Margaret, Ariana Rossi, and others, and also other contexts. So the patterns that I'm going to share today, we are told work in many other contexts, not just contracts. And here's really the short summary of the history of the first 25 years. When I started in visualization in contract education. I did executive education and student education in contracts, in action, real life. And we early found out that a visualizer, a graphic note taker joining me in the workshop was a great asset to help people get engaged and see what was happening and what the contracts were about and how they worked. And they got interested in contracts, which they weren't necessarily before, even if they were professionals working with contracts. I got excited about the invisible terms, by which I mean the default rules that apply, that we lawyers see, but people who read the contract might not know about. So if you don't mention a warranty or liability in the contract or what follows from a breach, there's still remedies because the law gives you remedies. So these sorts of things were my early interest, and I used to use visuals in my writings just to make things easier for non-lawyers to get excited about, or at least interested in, and to read. And that was the time of visualization about contracts. Then when I met Stefania, we saw that, hey, we could use these in contracts themselves. And we started embedding visuals, adding them to text in contracts. Our dissertations, and later what I call this era now is visualization in, about, for, and as contracts. We can use visuals in so many ways, and we have brought it to practice through various means. And I don't want to bore you too much with the topic and the history, just to say that on this day, we got a message from our publisher that the legal design book is out. So this is today, and then next year we will have a research handbook on contract design by Edward Elgar coming out. Here's one of the attempts we made early on, Stefania, Michael Curtotti, and myself. This is something where I would really want your and need your help, because we still don't know how to do this and automate this. We are dependent on manual work. So the contract visualization that I'm going to share is done by people. And here's the library that I'm going to demo in a little while. It's the Contract Design Pattern Library, first made for IACCM, the International Association for Contract and Commercial Management, which is now called World CC. Why are we then doing this? What is the problem that we are trying to solve? I'm sure many of you are familiar with this problem, which has many names actually and many causes. It's called fine print or wall of text or legalese and scattered information. People just have too much information in too many places to read, to even bother to start reading, let alone understanding or working or enjoying working with contracts. People give up. And that is a major problem for everybody. Negative surprises, which we want to avoid. And we didn't really start this. Fred Rodell already in 1936 discovered two things wrong with almost all legal writing. He said one is its style and the other is its content. So there's something for us to fix. Just two things, but plenty still. And the reason, of course, is that we lawyers, we are taught that someday someone will try to find something wrong with what we wrote. And that's why we try to be as precise as we can. So precision is, well, it's a goal, but it's also a problem if it gets too much focus and user-friendliness, usability, functionality is forgotten. And the problem for people in the field is, of course, that it's getting more and more every year. There's more to read, more to work with, all sorts of manuals and policy guidance and stuff to read. And those readers' problems, if we work inside an organization and we work with contractual risk management, those problems of the readers become our problems as the writers. Because if people don't read or find or understand or remember even the key points, then they are not going to be able to follow the contract and perform as intended. So non-compliance occurs, which is in the first place what we want to avoid. Then again, people keep asking us, the experts, same questions, always repeatedly, and we, the legal department, become the bottleneck. Readers' problems become writers' problems. And contract complexity is a major cause of risk, even though we want it to be really contracts that guard us against risks. So we need better contracts, contracts that work for the readers and users. And we as writers need help in producing such contracts. And now we get to the solution. We want to be proactive and preventive. Proactive law, preventive law, that's a topic for another session. We want to use design. Designers know that it's good to show, not just tell. So they use visuals, among other things. And then there's this thing about patterns that we can identify, catalog, and share, and we have. First, I would like to mention one colleague, Rob Waller, with whom we have done a couple of projects together. He's written technical papers and a lot of research and practical materials on information design. So you might want to listen to the podcast that was done last week. It's on proactive legal information design. In it, we mentioned a project we did in Canada. So if you're interested in cooperation through clarity, designing simplified contracts, you can go and find the resources on ResearchGate and read more. What we are after is functionality, legal functionality, operational functionality, and usability, and a good user experience, which is natural for everything else we do and buy and produce. But it wasn't much talked about until we started to work with contracts and look for ways to make contracts more usable, useful, and functional. Here's one example. Contract visuals, they can show workflows or processes. They were used in manuals, guidance documents frequently, but not contracts themselves necessarily. So we started doing that. Here's a guide, an early guide done in Finnish by Stefania and a research team. You may have seen pictures taken from it. That was really new, innovative at that time when we started doing this, showing where things will need to follow a certain step-by-step procedure, show it in a manual, or you can even do it in the contract. Here's the swim lane. So many of these things you recognize. You've probably seen Creative Commons licenses and their icon system. There's the layering that they use with the legal code, human readable texts, and machine readable texts. So these things are around us. And we started collecting these ideas. Shell is perhaps one of the very early adopters and well known for converting their conventional contract terms and conditions to visuals. On the left, you'll see an excerpt from their traditional contract terms. They were complex, adversarial, and often ignored. And they moved. With Rob Waller, they made visual contracts, which were and are simple, friendly, and adopted. used in many parts of the world. This is their lubricants. So they show how you can work with the ship, for example, as in this case, and what happens in different situations. So if you're interested, you will find their terms and conditions on the internet. There's been writings about them in Forbes, Financial Times, various other places. So they are an early adopter. And what we have done is we have moved or are suggesting to move from drafting to design so that we have contracts that are legal friendly, yes, legally functional, but not only that. Contracts, we want to be business friendly and user friendly as well. And now we are getting to patterns because we found that other professions also have challenges balancing different interests and competing goals. So we found that we could borrow tools from other people and balance these different needs and approaches. And so we found architects and engineers and designers using design patterns, which are reusable forms of solutions to recurring problems. We have looked at different categories, we have written about them, and I thought that I'd pick the visual representation patterns today. They are well-known patterns. They look like this: flowcharts, timelines, tables, swim lanes. We didn't invent them. We just applied them in a new context. And images can do so many things. Linguists and communication folks, researchers have looked into what images can do, and we have written about that, trying to make images plus text work together in an optimal way. We have collected design patterns. They are familiar for you if you work in software engineering. I'm sure we have used them for learning, examples, teaching, comparison, and inspiration. So I hope they will inspire you. I will now get to the demo. Here's pattern structures. Alexander, the architect, they were first to put these things into a particular order in the catalog. Tidwell, Yahoo, Waller and others, and then Margaret and myself, we have structured them in different ways, but you'll see soon what it is, how it looks. This is the contract design pattern library that I'm gonna take you to, and a very quick demo on how you can use contract design patterns to avoid understandability problems in contracts. This is the first page. So if you go to the pattern library, I hope you can see my screen still. So the pattern library is made by Stefania and myself for the World CC. It's open access, it's free. And how can you use it? We first give you some examples how you can get started, how you can use the patterns. So here we say you can go and have a look and learn and get inspired, hopefully, and pick and mix and adapt and implement. You can experiment and scale, but please remember that patterns are there for concepts and ideas. They are not there to be copy-pasted. So you're supposed to get and do your own, but you're not supposed to copy paste. They are copyrighted by other people. And here, let's go and explore the library. As you can see, we are adding new patterns, but here are already, we have 10 different pattern families there. We've given them all names, and then we have structured them in a particular way so as to make them easier for you to use. So pattern families, we have 10: emphasis, explainers, layering, layout, navigation, organizing, and so on. And I'll go to visuals because this is about visual patterns. So we first say what you can do with them, how you can use them, and then we show patterns that are visual patterns. So you can go and have a look, for example, at the delivery diagram. We already saw some. And then here we say, what is it? What problems does it solve? When should you use it? How can you use it? And we suggest contracts themselves, contract guides and playbooks, training materials, contract planning and negotiations, so different contexts. And the best part is the examples, if you ask me. You can go and have a look at patterns in use. So here's a delivery diagram. There are the shell examples there, and you can see others. We have had legal design jams and other contexts where we have created those, and many of them are actually in use. There are other examples that you might find of interest if you're interested in, for example, what Shell has used, what patterns they use. So you can go and type in Shell in the search field and see that they use clause summaries, delivery diagrams, flowcharts, and various other patterns. Let's go and look at the timeline pattern. So the best part, examples, we have different examples from different contexts. Here's a subscription and payments example. Here's the example we already saw, approval process. Here's Shell's example and various other things in context. You can see what happens at what stage. So these examples, I think, should suffice for you to just get the idea of what it is. And maybe one more, let's go and have a look at one more, and then I'll just conclude. This is really maybe difficult to choose. There are so many patterns that I like, but here's one that I like in particular a lot because it's one which can help you simplify contracts. Here's an example where we collected materials from different appendices and put them in one place. Genre shifting, moving from complicated legal rules to user guides. You can see different ways of using simplification and structuring in contracts and about contracts, even a table of contents with color coding. And this is one that I would recommend if you have a very complex situation. So draw a picture and show how many pages, how scattered that information is that you have. And in this case, it looked simple to begin with, but with all the references, you suddenly had more than 150 pages of stuff for a first-timer to read. So these sorts of things really can make life difficult for the users. And we want life to be easy for the users. So here's where you can find more information about these things. I'm going to send you a summary if you're interested, so you can find the resources. And I'll conclude with Tim Cummins, who says that in just a few years, we will look back and wonder why it took so long to make our contracts intelligible to the mass of people they affect.
Okay, thank you very much, Helena, for these great insights and also for demoing us here the contract design pattern library. So that is, I think, a very useful resource that is very valuable. So I've looked at it myself. You had examples from Shell. I think there are also other companies. I think Airbus, I think, was also another company that already uses that in practice. So I think that greatly connects now what you have done in your research actually to what can be used in practice. So thank you very much.